The expensive champagne glasses clinked like delicate wind chimes across the dimly lit restaurant. I wiped my clammy palms against the stiff black fabric of my uniform for the 100th time that evening. 6 months at Bellissimo, and I still felt like an imposter among the crystal chandeliers and hushed conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes. "Table 7 needs attention, Ellie," Marco hissed as he brushed past me, balancing a tray of appetizers that cost more than my monthly rent. Mr. Ricci's daughter just arrived. My stomach tightened at the name. Everyone who worked at Bellissimo knew about the Ricci family. They didn't just own this restaurant, they owned half the neighborhood, the kinds of people who never showed their faces in public without a reason, and never without security. I grabbed a pitcher of ice water and approached table 7, keeping my eyes down as I'd been trained. The table occupied the most private corner of the restaurant, partially obscured by an ornate wooden screen. Even the lighting seemed different there, warmer, more forgiving, as if the very air knew to flatter its occupants. "Would you like some water, Miss Ricci?" I asked, my voice barely audible above the pianist playing softly in the background. When I finally allowed myself to look at her, I was struck by how young she seemed, maybe 20 at most. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than my car. Her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that emphasized her sharp cheekbones. But it was her eyes that caught me off guard, wide and alert, darting around the restaurant with an intensity that seemed out of place for someone her age. "Thank you," she said, watching me carefully as I poured. She didn't smile. I noticed she was alone at the large table, unusual for the Ricci family, who typically arrived in groups with at least 2 men standing at strategic points around them. Before I could wonder about this, the front door of the restaurant opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. I didn't need to turn around to know who had entered. The sudden stiffening of every staff member's spine told me everything. A cold prickle ran down my neck as the sound of confident footsteps approached. Unhurried, deliberate, like someone who never needed to rush because the world would always wait for him. The scent reached me first, expensive cologne with notes of cedar, and something darker, more primal. Then came the whisper of a perfectly tailored suit, the kind that makes no sound except when its wearer allows it to. "You're early, Sophia," came a deep voice from behind me, smooth as aged whiskey but with an edge that made my hand tremble slightly, water sloshing dangerously close to the glass's rim. I kept my eyes fixed on the pitcher, but in my peripheral vision, I caught glimpses of him as he moved around the table. Tall, dark hair cut precisely, a watch that caught the light as he pulled out his chair. He hadn't acknowledged my existence, yet I felt suffocated by his presence. "I had nothing better to do," Sophia replied, her tone carrying a hint of defiance that made me inwardly cringe. No one spoke that way to Mr. Ricci, not even his daughter, I would have thought. I finished pouring and was about to retreat when Sophia looked up at me again. "Could I have a lemon for my water, please?" "Of course," I murmured, but as I turned to leave, her hand caught my wrist, a lightning-quick movement that froze me in place. Her touch was light but insistent, and when my startled eyes met hers, she gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head before releasing me. I felt Ricci's attention shift to me for the first time, the weight of his gaze like a physical thing pressing against my skin. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "No, sir," I replied automatically, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Just getting Miss Ricci a lemon." I walked away on legs that threatened to buckle, feeling his eyes following me until I disappeared into the kitchen. I pressed my back against the cool tile wall, trying to steady my breathing. "You okay, Ellie? You look like you've seen a ghost." It was Jake, one of the busboys, his freckled face concerned as he loaded dirty dishes into the industrial washer. "I'm fine," I lied, reaching for a small plate and placing a carefully sliced lemon wedge on it, "just tired." But as I prepared to return to table 7, I noticed something beneath my thumb, a small folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Sophia must have slipped it into my palm when she grabbed my wrist. My first instinct was to throw it away, to pretend I'd never felt the paper against my skin. Nothing good could come from getting involved with the Riccis, but curiosity, my eternal downfall, made me unfold it quickly, my body angled away from the kitchen doors. "Help me. Not what you think." 11 p.m. Employee exit. 5 words that would change everything. 5 words that would destroy the careful, invisible life I'd constructed since leaving home 2 years ago. 5 words that I should have ignored. I refolded the note and tucked it into my bra, beneath my shirt, where no one would see it. Then I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and carried the lemon back to table 7. When I placed it on the table, Sophia didn't look at me, but Mr. Ricci did. Really looked at me, for the first time. His eyes were the same deep brown as his daughter's, but where hers had seemed frightened, his were calculating, almost amused. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps mid-30s, with the kind of face that was handsome in a harsh way, all sharp angles and controlled intensity. "What's your name?" he asked, the question stopping me in my tracks. "Ellie, sir. Ellie Monroe." He nodded slightly as if filing this information away. "How long have you worked here, Ellie Monroe?" 6 months, sir." My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too high, too nervous. He studied me for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Bring us the wine list, please." I nodded and hurried away, feeling as though I'd just been dismissed from an interrogation I hadn't realized I was having. As I retrieved the leather-bound wine list, I saw Marco watching me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Be careful," he whispered as I passed him. "Table 7 is asking for you specifically now." The rest of their dinner passed in a blur of tension. Sophia barely touched her food, while Mr. Ricci ate methodically, his movements precise and controlled. They spoke little, and when they did, it was in hushed Italian that I couldn't understand. But I felt the tension between them, thick and suffocating, like the air before a storm. I served them with my eyes down, my hands steady through sheer force of will. Each time I approached, I felt Mr. Ricci's gaze tracking my movements with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Not with fear exactly, though that was certainly part of it. There was something else there, something I refused to acknowledge. At 10:30, they finished their meal. Mr. Ricci paid in cash, a thick stack of bills that he didn't bother to count, and left a tip that made my eyes widen. As they stood to leave, Sophia dropped her napkin, and when I bent to retrieve it, she whispered one word, "Please." Then they were gone, followed by a man I hadn't noticed before. Large, silent, with the unmistakable bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket. The restaurant seemed to collectively exhale, returning to normal as if waking from a spell. I watched the clock for the next half hour, my mind racing. I could just go home, pretend none of this had happened. I had an early class tomorrow at the community college where I was slowly, painfully working toward a nursing degree. I had a life, small and struggling as it was, that I'd built from nothing after leaving my alcoholic father's house. But that whispered please echoed in my head, and perhaps it was my own history, of unanswered pleas for help, of doors that never opened when I needed them to. That made my decision for me. At 10:55, I told Marco I wasn't feeling well and needed to leave early. He looked skeptical, but didn't argue. I changed out of my uniform in the small staff bathroom, pulling on my worn jeans and faded blue sweater, clothes that instantly transformed me from server to nobody. The employee exit was at the back of the restaurant, down a narrow hallway past the dry storage. I pushed the door open at exactly 11 stepping into the cold night air of the alley behind Bellissimo. At first, I thought I was alone, and relief mingled with disappointment in my chest. Then a shadow moved near the dumpster, and Sophia Ricci stepped into the pale glow of the security light. She'd exchanged her elegant dress for jeans and a hoodie, her hair now covered by a baseball cap. Without the makeup and fine clothes, she looked even younger. "You came," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my distance, suddenly aware of how foolish this was. "I need your help," she said, glancing nervously toward the street. "My father—" She never finished the sentence. Headlights suddenly flooded the alley, blinding us both. A sleek black car had pulled up, blocking the exit. Before I could react, the back door opened, and Mr. Ricci stepped out, his face a mask of cold fury that made my blood freeze. Behind him emerged the same large man I'd seen earlier, his hand now resting openly on his gun. Sophia made a small sound beside me, half gasp, half sob. "Sophia, Mr. Ricci said, his voice terrifyingly calm as he approached us. You disappoint me. Then his eyes shifted to me, and I felt pinned in place like a butterfly in a collection. And you, Ellie Monroe, you have made a very, very serious mistake. The security light caught the gleam in his eyes. Not just anger, but something possessive, almost hungry. In that moment, I realized I'd stumbled into something far more dangerous than a family disagreement, something I might never escape. Time seemed to stretch and distort in the narrow alley. The cold brick wall pressed against my back as I instinctively retreated, my escape cut off by a second man who had materialized behind me. The smell of rotting vegetables from the dumpster mingled with the sharp tang of fear in my nostrils. "Father, please," Sophia said, stepping slightly in front of me. "She has nothing to do with this. She's just a waitress." Mr. Ricci's laugh was soft, almost gentle, but it sent a chill down my spine. A waitress who decided to meet my daughter in secret after hours. A waitress who accepted a note, who conspired behind my back. His eyes never left mine as he spoke. "No. I think Ellie here has chosen to involve herself quite deliberately. I started to protest, but the words died in my throat as he raised his hand slightly. "Don't insult my intelligence," he said. "It never ends well." He turned to his daughter, switching to Italian, his voice harder now. Sophia responded, her words tumbling out rapidly, desperately. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the power dynamic was unmistakable. A king tolerating temporary insubordination from a subject. The large man, a bodyguard I realized, kept his eyes on me, his expression blank but watchful. I was calculating my chances of running when Mr. Ricci switched back to English. "Get in the car, Sophia," he said. It wasn't a request. "No." Her voice shook, but she stood her ground. "I won't go back. I can't live like this anymore." Something dangerous flashed across her father's face. "We will not have this conversation here," he said, each word precise and clipped. He nodded to the bodyguard, who moved toward Sophia. "Don't touch her," I said before I could stop myself. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, and I immediately regretted speaking. Mr. Ricci's expression shifted from anger to something more complicated. Surprise, perhaps, and a calculating interest that made me even more uncomfortable. "You have courage," he said quietly. Misplaced, but interesting nonetheless. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell that cologne again, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "What exactly did my daughter tell you, Ellie Monroe?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "She just asked for help." His eyes searched mine, looking for deception. "And you agreed, without knowing what kind of help, without knowing anything about her situation. Why?" The question caught me off guard. Why had I come? I barely knew Sophia Ricci. Meeting her could cost me my job, or worse, as I was now discovering. "Because she asked," I finally said. She said please. Something unreadable passed across his face. For a moment I thought I saw a flicker of respect, quickly replaced by his previous coldness. "Antonio," he said to the bodyguard, "escort my daughter to the car." This time, Sophia didn't resist. Her shoulders slumped in defeat as Antonio gently but firmly took her arm. As she passed me, she whispered, "I'm sorry." Then she was gone, guided into the back of the sleek black car, leaving me alone with Mr. Ricci and the second guard blocking the alley exit. "What happens now?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. Mr. Ricci studied me for a long moment. "That depends entirely on you," he said finally. "Tell me, Ellie Monroe, do you know who I am? Beyond a restaurant owner?" I swallowed hard. Everyone in this part of the city knew the rumors about the Ricci family, about their connections, about the businesses that served as fronts for other activities. I deliberately avoided learning details. Information was dangerous in a world like theirs. "I know enough to be afraid," I admitted. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Good." Fear is appropriate, but perhaps incomplete. He reached into his suit pocket, and I flinched involuntarily, earning another almost smile from him, but he only withdrew a business card, which he held out to me. I hesitated before taking it, careful not to let our fingers touch. The card was heavy, expensive stock, with just a name and phone number embossed in dark ink. Matteo Ricci. My daughter believes she needs rescuing, he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. She is young, dramatic, sheltered. What she doesn't understand is that the world I keep her from is infinitely more dangerous than the one I've created for her. Then why keep her prisoner? The words slipped out before I could stop them. His eyes flashed. Is that what she told you? That she's a prisoner? She didn't have to, I replied, finding a courage I didn't know I possessed. I saw her face. I heard how she spoke to you. Matteo Ricci fell silent, regarding me with renewed interest. The alley suddenly felt too small, too intimate. I became acutely aware of how close he was standing, of how the shadows played across the sharp lines of his face. You know nothing about my family, about my world, or what it takes to survive in it, he said finally. His voice remained calm, but there was an intensity beneath it that made my pulse quicken. But I admire your loyalty to someone you just met. It's unusual. He glanced at his watch, a brief, elegant movement. It's late. Marco will be wondering where his waitress has gone. I felt a jolt of fear. Are you going to tell him about this? That depends on what happens next. He gestured to the card still clutched in my hand. My private number. If my daughter contacts you again, and she will try, she is nothing if not persistent, you will call me immediately. In return, you keep your job, and I forget this unfortunate incident. It wasn't a request, it was a command, and we both knew it. And if I don't? I asked, already knowing the answer. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face and somehow made him more frightening, not less. Let's say choices have consequences, Ellie. I'd hate to see you face the wrong ones. With that, he turned and walked back to the car. The second guard followed, and I was suddenly alone in the alley, clutching a business card that felt like it might burn through my palm. I waited until the car disappeared from sight before my legs finally gave way, and I sank to the dirty pavement, shaking uncontrollably. I should call the police, but what would I say? That the daughter of a powerful man had asked for help, and then left willingly with her father? That I'd been threatened in ways too subtle to articulate? 20 minutes later, I was walking the 11 blocks to my apartment, too shaken to wait for the bus, too paranoid to call a rideshare that might leave a digital trail. Every passing car made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to conceal watching eyes. My apartment building was a 6-story walk-up in a neighborhood that was neither dangerous nor safe, just forgotten, like its inhabitants. The elevator had been temporarily out of service since before I moved in, so I trudged up 4 flights of stairs, my legs still unsteady. Mrs. Petrova from 4C was in the hallway with her yapping Pomeranian. She gave me her usual disapproving look. She thought I worked nights at a bar, not a high-end restaurant, and had made her moral judgment accordingly. Tonight, I didn't even have the energy to nod hello. Inside my studio apartment, I double-locked the door and slid the chain into place, though the flimsy metal would do little against anyone truly determined to get in. The space was small, but clean, with second-hand furniture I'd carefully selected for comfort, rather than style. My nursing textbooks were stacked neatly on the coffee table, a half-written essay on patient assessment open on my laptop. It all looked strange to me now, like props on a stage, the trappings of a normal life that had been revealed as an illusion in the span of a single evening. I took a scalding shower, scrubbing my skin until it was raw, as if I could wash away the memory of Matteo Ricci's eyes on me, the implicit threat in his smile. Afterward, wrapped in my threadbare robe, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at his business card, turning it over and over in my fingers. The sensible thing, the safe thing, would be to do exactly as he asked. If Sophia contacted me again, I would call him, keep my job, stay invisible. It was the path of least resistance, the path of survival, but I kept seeing Sophia's face, hearing that whispered, please. I remembered what it was like to be trapped with no way out, to plead for help that never came. I set the card on my nightstand and collapsed into bed, exhaustion overtaking fear. But sleep brought no relief, only fragmented dreams where I was running down endless hallways, Matteo Ricci's voice echoing behind me. Always calm, always getting closer no matter how fast I ran. I woke at dawn, gritty-eyed and unrested. For a blissful moment, I thought perhaps it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw the business card, stark white against the dark wood of my nightstand, and reality came crashing back. My shift at Bellissimo wasn't until 4 p.m., which gave me time to attend my morning classes. I went through the motions mechanically, taking notes without processing the information, nodding at the right intervals when classmates spoke to me. All the while, a voice in my head repeated, "What have you gotten yourself into?" By the time I arrived at Bellissimo that afternoon, I had convinced myself that things would return to normal. Sofia wouldn't contact me again. Matteo Ricci would forget about me. I was nobody, invisible. That had always been my strength and my protection. Marco greeted me with raised eyebrows. "Feeling better?" "Much," I lied, tying my apron with hands that only shook slightly. "Thanks for understanding last night." He studied me for a moment too long, then shrugged. "Your section is the same as usual. It's going to be busy. There's a private party in the back room at 8. Relief washed over me. Normal. Routine. I could do this. For the first hour, everything proceeded as usual. I took orders, delivered drinks, smiled politely at customers who looked through me rather than at me. The familiar rhythm of restaurant work was soothing, allowing me to push away thoughts of dark cars and whispered pleas. Then, at precisely 5:30 p.m., the front door opened, and Matteo Ricci walked in. He wasn't dressed for dinner, no suit this time, but dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that somehow looked more expensive than any formal wear. No bodyguards flanked him, but his presence filled the space just the same. Every staff member straightened imperceptibly as he passed, their eyes carefully averted. My heart hammered against my ribs as he approached the hostess stand. Would he request my section? Would he mention last night? But he merely exchanged a few quiet words with Sofia, the hostess, who nodded deferentially and led him to a table. In Marco's section, not mine. I exhaled slowly, continuing with my work while keeping him in my peripheral vision. He ordered a drink, checked his watch occasionally, appeared to be waiting for someone, not Sofia. She was nowhere to be seen. I was delivering a tray of drinks to a group of businessmen when I felt it. That same prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced up and found Matteo's eyes on me from across the room, his expression unreadable. He raised his glass slightly, an acknowledgement that made my face heat inexplicably. An hour later, his guests still hadn't arrived. I was in the back, carefully selecting wines for table 12, when a voice behind me said, "We need to talk." I whirled around, nearly dropping an expensive bottle of Barolo. Matteo Ricci stood in the doorway of the wine cellar, effectively blocking the only exit. "This is staff only," I said, hating how breathless I sounded. "I own the restaurant," he reminded me, stepping fully into the cellar and letting the door swing shut behind him. The space suddenly seemed much smaller, the air thicker. "And I think you know this conversation can't wait. I haven't seen or heard from Sofia," I said quickly. "I was going to call if I did, just like you asked." He moved closer, his movements deliberate, unhurried. "That's not why I'm here, Ellie." The way he said my name, soft, almost intimate, sent an involuntary shiver up my spine. I backed up until I felt the wooden wine racks press against my back. "Then why?" I managed to ask. "Because you're in danger," he said simply. "And it's my fault." "Danger?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper in the dim cellar. The word hung between us, heavy with implication. "What kind of danger?" Matteo stepped closer, his tall frame blocking what little light filtered in from the crack beneath the door. "My daughter didn't tell you anything?" "No," I said honestly. "Just asked for help. That's all." He studied me for a moment, as if weighing the truth of my words. "Sofia has complicated herself with dangerous people. People who would use anyone connected to her to get to me. But I'm not connected to her," I protested. "I'm just a waitress who met her in secret," he interrupted. "Who was seen by at least 2 of my men speaking with her privately. That's connection enough for them." My mind raced, trying to make sense of his words. "Them? Who's them?" Matteo's jaw tightened. "Business rivals, former associates, people who would consider my daughter a valuable acquisition." The clinical way he described what sounded like potential kidnapping made my stomach turn. Yet beneath my fear, another emotion was building: anger. If she's in such danger, Why was she trying to escape you? I challenged. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise perhaps that I would dare question him. Because she's young, sheltered. She doesn't understand the realities of our world. Or maybe she understands all too well what kind of man her father is, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I expected anger, perhaps even violence, but Mateo's response surprised me. He laughed. A short, genuine sound that transformed his face momentarily. "You're either very brave or very foolish," he said, stepping close enough that I could see the faint stubble along his jaw, smell the cedar notes of his cologne. Possibly both. I pressed myself harder against the wine rack, feeling the edges dig into my back. "What do you want from me, Mr. Ricci?" "Mateo," he corrected softly, "and I want your cooperation, Ellie. Sophia trusts you, for whatever reason. If she reaches out again, I need to know immediately, not just because I ordered you to tell me, but because you understand what's at stake." "And what is at stake?" I asked, finding courage in the growing certainty that he wasn't going to harm me, at least not physically, not here. "Her life," he said simply, "and possibly yours now too." Before I could respond, the cellar door swung open, flooding the small space with light. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression shifting rapidly from surprise to something more calculated as he took in the scene. Me backed against the wine rack, Mateo standing too close. "Excuse the interruption, Mr. Ricci," he said smoothly. "Ellie, table 4 is asking for their check." "Of course," I said, grateful for the escape. I slipped past Mateo, careful not to touch him, but his hand caught my arm as I passed, his grip firm but not painful. "Think about what I said," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Then he released me, and I hurried from the cellar, feeling both his and Marco's eyes on my back as I left. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of nervous energy. I dropped a tray of glasses, mixed up orders, and generally performed terribly. Marco watched me with increasing irritation, but said nothing about finding me with the owner in the wine cellar. Mateo remained at his table for another hour, nursing a single drink, his dark eyes finding me across the room at unpredictable intervals. When he finally left, he passed close to where I was clearing a table. "Remember," he said quietly, without breaking stride, "you call me first." Then he was gone, and I could breathe again. My apartment seemed even smaller that night, the walls pressing in as I paced the limited floor space. Danger. What kind of danger could possibly touch me? I was nobody. Invisible. That had been my protection for years. But perhaps that protection had expired the moment Sophia Ricci slipped a note into my palm. Sleep eluded me. I kept replaying Mateo's words, the intensity in his eyes when he spoke of threats to his daughter. Was it genuine concern, or the possessive rage of a man who couldn't stand to lose what he considered his property? The next morning brought no clarity, only a headache from lack of sleep and a sense of being watched that followed me to class, then to the small cafe where I worked mornings 3 days a week. By the time I arrived at Bellissimo for my evening shift, my nerves were strung tight as piano wire. "You're on the private room tonight," Marco informed me as soon as I arrived. "Corporate dinner, 12 guests. They've pre-ordered everything, so it should be straightforward." I nodded, relieved at the simple assignment. The private dining room was separate from the main restaurant, with its own entrance and a door that could be closed for privacy. A few hours of serving anonymous business people might be exactly what I needed to reset my frayed nerves. The room was immaculate, the long table set with Bellissimo's finest china and crystal. I was arranging the final place settings when the door opened behind me. "Hello, Ellie." I froze, then turned slowly. Sophia Ricci stood in the doorway, wearing the same cap and hoodie combination from the alley, but with large sunglasses obscuring most of her face. She glanced nervously over her shoulder before slipping inside and closing the door. "You can't be here," I said immediately, backing away. Mateo's business card seemed to burn in my pocket where I'd been carrying it. "Your father is in a meeting across town," she finished. "We have 10 minutes. Please, just listen." Every instinct told me to call Mateo immediately, to honor our agreement and ensure my own safety. But the desperation in her voice held me in place. 5 minutes, I conceded. Then I have to call your father. She nodded rapidly, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, possibly both. My father told you I'm in danger, didn't he? That people want to use me to get to him? I nodded cautiously. It's true, she said, her voice breaking slightly. But what he didn't tell you is that he's arranged a marriage for me to one of those very people, a peace offering, a business transaction. Her mouth twisted bitterly around the words. I don't understand, I said, though the sinking feeling in my stomach suggested otherwise. My father's territory has been challenged by the Vasquez family for years, she explained rapidly, her words tumbling over each other. Their oldest son, Carlos, is my father's idea of a suitable match. The wedding is in 2 weeks, and once I'm married, I'll be trapped forever. I thought of Mateo's possessive gaze, the way he spoke of protecting his daughter. Was this his version of protection? Trading her like a commodity? What do you want from me? I asked, already dreading the answer. Help me get away, she pleaded. Just for a few days, until I can contact my mother's family in Boston. They'll help me disappear. Sophia, I can't. I started, but she cut me off. I have money, she said urgently. Enough to make it worth your risk, and enough to start a new life somewhere my father can't find me. The mention of money stung. I don't want your money, I said firmly. Then do it because it's right, she countered. Because no one should be sold into a marriage they don't want. The door handle turned suddenly, and we both froze. Sophia backed away rapidly, slipping behind the heavy curtains at the window just as Marco entered. Everything ready? He asked, surveying the room with a critical eye. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Good. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Make sure the wine is breathing. He left, and I exhaled shakily. Sophia emerged from behind the curtain. I have to go, she whispered. But I'll contact you again. Please, think about what I said. She slipped out the door before I could respond, leaving me standing alone in the perfectly arranged room, my heart pounding with indecision. The corporate dinner proceeded without incident, though I moved through it like a sleepwalker, my mind elsewhere. After my shift, I walked home slowly, the night air cool against my flushed skin. Mateo's card seemed to grow heavier in my pocket with each step. I should call him. I had promised, and yet... My phone rang suddenly, startling me from my thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Hello? I answered cautiously. You didn't call me. Mateo's voice, smooth and controlled as ever, but with an undercurrent I couldn't identify. Sophia came to see you tonight. My blood ran cold. How did you... I have eyes everywhere, Ellie, he said simply. Especially on my daughter, and now it seems on you as well. I stopped walking, suddenly aware of the empty street around me, the shadows between streetlights. Are you having me followed? Protected, he corrected. There's a difference. I don't want your protection, I said, anger flaring. I don't want any part of this. It's too late for that. His voice softened slightly. You're already involved. The question is whether you'll be an ally or an obstacle. I'm neither, I insisted. I'm just a waitress who got caught in something she doesn't understand. Then let me help you understand, he said. A sleek black car turned the corner ahead, rolling to a stop beside me. The back window lowered to reveal Mateo inside, his phone still at his ear. Get in. I stood frozen on the sidewalk staring at him. He ended the call and leaned forward slightly. Please, Ellie, he said, and the unexpected word caught me off guard. It's not safe for you out here, not anymore. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or the genuine concern I thought I heard in his voice, or simply the realization that I was already too deep in whatever this was. But I found myself opening the car door and sliding into the smooth leather seat beside him. The interior smelled of leather and his now familiar cologne. The partition between us and the driver was closed, creating an intimate space that felt both like a sanctuary and a trap. What did Sophia tell you? He asked without preamble as the car pulled away from the curb. I considered lying, but something told me he would know, that you're forcing her to marry someone named Carlos Vasquez, that she's a business transaction to you. Mateo's expression hardened. She told you that, and you believed her. Should I not have? I challenged. He turned to face me fully, his eyes intense in the dim light from passing street lamps. Sophia is young, sheltered, romantic. She sees the world in black and white. The reality is far more complex. Then explain it to me, I said. Make me understand. Matteo was silent for a long moment, watching the city slide past the tinted windows. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost some of its customary control. My wife died when Sophia was 8, he said. Cancer. It was quick. Too quick for proper goodbyes. He flexed his fingers, a subtle movement that betrayed tension. After that, it was just the two of us. I did everything I could to protect her from my world. Private schools, security details, limited exposure to the family business. Your illegal family business, I clarified. He shot me a look that might have been amused. My complicated family business, he corrected. One with enemies who wouldn't hesitate to use a man's daughter against him. The car turned onto a street lined with luxury high-rises, moving deeper into the wealthy part of the city I rarely ventured into. The Vasquez family has been expanding their territory for years, Matteo continued. 6 months ago, they crossed a line. One of my lieutenants was found dead, a warning, a challenge. His jaw tightened. I could have started a war. Many of my men wanted that, but wars have casualties, Ellie. Innocent ones. So you offered your daughter instead, I said, unable to keep the disgust from my voice. I offered an alliance, he countered sharply. A joining of families that would ensure peace. Sophia and Carlos have known each other since childhood. He's educated, respectful. And she doesn't love him, I interrupted. Matteo made a dismissive gesture. Love is a luxury many don't have. Sophia's safety, everyone's safety, is my priority. That's not your decision to make for her, I argued. It is exactly my decision, he said, his voice hardening. I am her father. Everything I do, every choice I make, is to keep her safe. Safe and miserable, I muttered. The car slowed, pulling into the private garage beneath one of the high-rises. As we came to a stop, Matteo turned to face me fully. You see only part of the picture, Ellie, he said quietly. Sophia is naive. She believes she can simply run away, start a new life. But the Vasquez family would take her disappearance as an insult, a rejection of peace. They would retaliate. People would die. I wanted to argue, to defend Sophia's right to choose her own path, but the gravity in his voice gave me pause. So what happens now? I asked instead. Now, he said, opening his door. We continue this conversation somewhere more comfortable. I hesitated, suddenly aware of how isolated I was, how completely in his power. I should go home, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Matteo's expression softened unexpectedly. I'm not going to hurt you, Ellie. If I wanted that, it would have happened already. He extended his hand. Please. There's more you need to understand. Against my better judgment, I placed my hand in his, allowing him to help me from the car. His skin was warm, his grip firm but gentle. I pulled away as soon as I was standing, but the brief contact left a lingering sensation on my palm. The elevator ride to the penthouse was silent, tense with unspoken thoughts. Matteo stood with practiced stillness beside me, but I caught him watching my reflection in the polished doors, his expression guarded. The penthouse itself was both less and more than I had expected. No gaudy displays of wealth, no ostentatious art or gold fixtures. Instead, clean lines and understated luxury, Italian leather furniture, original paintings that looked valuable but not showy, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city lights. Your home is beautiful, I said, more to break the silence than anything else. One of them, he replied, moving to a bar cart near the windows. Drink? I shook my head. I need to keep my thoughts clear around you. That drew a small smile from him, wise. He poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid, then gestured toward the sofa. Please sit. I perched on the edge of the couch, ready to flee, though I knew there was nowhere to go. Matteo took the chair opposite me, studying me over the rim of his glass. Tell me about yourself, Ellie Monroe, he said unexpectedly. Beyond the waitress who works 2 jobs and studies nursing, I stiffened. You've been investigating me, Of course I have, he said, not bothering to deny it. You're involved with my daughter. I make it my business to know everything about anyone who comes near her. There's nothing to know, I said. I'm nobody special. I disagree, he replied, setting down his glass. 24 years old, raised by a single father after your mother left when you were 4, graduated high school with honors despite difficult home circumstances. Working your way through nursing school without taking loans. Seems rather special to me. The clinical recitation of my life made me feel exposed, vulnerable. Stop that, I said sharply. To my surprise, he inclined his head in acknowledgement. My apologies. But I needed to understand why Sophia chose you, of all people. What do you mean? Matteo leaned forward slightly. My daughter is sheltered. Yes, but not stupid. She deliberately sought you out, Ellie. Made contact specifically with you, not any other server. I need to know why. The realization hit me like cold water. You think I was already working with her? That this was some kind of plan? The thought occurred. Well, it's wrong, I said, standing abruptly. I never met Sophia before that night. I have no connection to your world, and frankly, I want to keep it that way. Matteo watched me pace, his expression calculating. Then why help her? Why take such a risk for a stranger? I stopped by the windows, looking out at the city spread below like a carpet of stars. From this height, the gritty reality of my neighborhood, my life, seemed remote and inconsequential. Because I know what it's like to be trapped, I said finally. The words dragged from someplace deep inside me. To have your future decided by someone else. To plead for help and have no one listen. I turned to find him watching me intently, something shifting in his expression. Your father, he said, not a question. I nodded, looking away. He wasn't always bad. After my mom left, he started drinking. And when he drank, he got mean. I wrapped my arms around myself, old habits resurfacing. Not violent, just cruel, controlling. I wasn't allowed friends, wasn't allowed to participate in school activities. My grades were the only thing that got me out. A scholarship to community college, and no one helped, Matteo supplied softly. I asked. Teachers, neighbors, even called social services once. I swallowed against the bitter memory. But he was charming when he needed to be. Good at making me sound like a dramatic teenager. So I learned to be invisible, to stop asking, to make my own escape. Silence fell between us, heavy with my unexpected confession. I hadn't meant to share so much, especially not with him, but something about the night, the unreality of standing in a Mafia boss's penthouse discussing his daughter's future, had loosened my usual caution. Sophia isn't trapped the way you were, Matteo said finally, his voice gentler than I'd heard before. She's protected, not imprisoned. The difference matters less than you think, I replied, turning back to him. If the end result is the same, a life not chosen, a future dictated by someone else's priorities. He studied me for a long moment. You see much for someone who tries to be invisible. The observation, unexpected and somehow intimate, made me uncomfortable. I looked away, focusing on a painting across the room, dark colors swirling into something that might have been a storm or might have been a face in shadow. Help me understand what Sophia is planning, Matteo said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. She mentioned her mother's family in Boston? I hesitated, weighing loyalty against reality. Sophia had trusted me, but I was here, in Matteo Ricci's home, with no real leverage or protection. And if what he said about the Vasquez family was true, she said she wanted to stay with them until she could disappear, I admitted finally. Start a new life somewhere you couldn't find her. Matteo's laugh was short, without humor. There is nowhere I couldn't find her, he said. And her mother's family, they're civilians. No protection, no understanding of the world Sophia comes from. They'd be sitting ducks. For the Vasquez family, or any number of others who would use her against me, he confirmed. Sophia doesn't understand the danger she's in, the danger she puts others in. I sank back onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. So what happens now? You force her to marry a man she doesn't love to prevent a war? She tries to escape and puts innocent people in danger? There's no good outcome here. Matteo's face softened unexpectedly. You care what happens to her, to a girl you barely know. Of course I do, I said, surprised by the question. Don't you? Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or regret. Everything I do is because I care for her. Even the things she hates me for. The raw honesty in his voice caught me off guard. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I glimpsed not the untouchable Mafia boss, but a father struggling to protect his child the only way he knew how. There has to be another solution, I said quietly. Some compromise. He shook his head. In my world, compromise is often seen as weakness, and weakness gets people killed. So does forcing people into corners, I countered. Sophia is desperate enough to risk everything to escape. What happens if she succeeds, even temporarily, or if she does something more drastic? Matteo went very still, his eyes darkening. What did she say to you exactly? I replayed our brief conversation in my mind. Just that she needed to get away, to contact her mother's family, that she had money. Did she say when? How she planned to leave? I shook my head. No details. Just that she'd contact me again. He stood abruptly, moving to the windows. For a long moment, he stared out at the city, his back to me, shoulders tense beneath the fine fabric of his sweater. I cannot allow her to leave, he said finally, his voice hard again. Not just for her safety, but for the peace I've negotiated. Too many lives depend on it. Then talk to her, I suggested. Really listen. Find out why she's so desperate to escape this marriage. He turned, and the look on his face was almost pitying. Sophia hasn't truly listened to me since her mother died. She sees me as her jailer, not her protector. Maybe she needs someone else to speak for her, I said without thinking. Someone who understands both sides. His eyes narrowed slightly. Someone like you? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I understood. I opened my mouth to refuse, to insist I wanted no further part in their drama, but something stopped me. The memory of Sophia's desperate plea. The thought of her being forced into a marriage that was nothing but a business transaction. I could try, I said finally, to talk to her, to help you both understand each other. Matteo's expression changed, a calculated interest replacing the momentary vulnerability. And what would you want in return, Ellie Monroe? The question startled me. What? Everyone wants something, he said, moving closer, his movements deliberately casual but somehow predatory. Safety? Money? A better apartment, perhaps? Tuition for your nursing degree? Anger flashed through me, hot and sudden. I'm not for sale, Mr. Ricci. A smile touched his lips, genuine this time. No, he said softly. I don't believe you are. How refreshing. The night air was cool on the balcony, a welcome relief from the intensity inside. Matteo had suggested we continue our conversation there, and I'd gratefully accepted the chance to breathe, to put some distance between us. The city sprawled below, a tapestry of lights and shadows, lives intersecting in ways the people living them could never fully understand. Just as my unremarkable existence had somehow become entangled with the Ricci's. Beautiful, isn't it? Matteo said, joining me at the railing. He'd discarded his sweater, standing now in just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms marked with a few faded scars. The change made him look more human, less the untouchable figure I'd first encountered. Yes, I admitted, keeping my eyes on the horizon. But beauty can be deceptive. He chuckled. A philosopher as well as a nurse. Just someone who's learned to look beneath surfaces, I replied. We stood in silence for a moment, the distant sounds of traffic floating up from far below. It felt surreal to be here, having this conversation with a man who, by his own admission, lived outside the law, who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. If I agree to let you speak with Sophia, he said finally, there would be conditions. I turned to face him. I'm listening. You would meet her at a location of my choosing, with my men nearby. You would encourage her to speak with me directly, to consider alternatives to running. His eyes held mine, serious and intent. And most importantly, you would report back to me everything she says, everything she plans. You want me to spy on your daughter, I translated flatly. I want you to help me keep her alive, he countered, This isn't a game, Ellie. The threats are real. If Sophia runs, if the Vasquez alliance falls apart because of it, people will die. Not just soldiers in this conflict, but innocents. Collateral damage. I considered his words, weighing them against Sophia's desperate plea. Both father and daughter believed they were right, both trapped in their own way by circumstances and choices. I'll talk to her, I said slowly. But I won't lie to her. I won't pretend I'm not reporting back to you. He raised an eyebrow. She won't trust you if she knows you're working with me. Then she shouldn't trust me, I said firmly. I won't build a relationship on deception, not even to help you. Mateo studied me with renewed interest. Most people would say whatever I wanted to hear in your position. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool night air. What made you this way, Ellie Monroe? This unbending? The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before, had ever seen that core of stubborn principle as anything but an inconvenience. Survival, I answered honestly. When everything else is taken from you, security, family, certainty, all you have left is who you are, what you'll compromise and what you won't. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition that made me feel suddenly exposed, as if I'd revealed more than I intended. Very well, he said, stepping back slightly. Honesty it is. Tell Sophia I know she contacted you. Tell her you've spoken with me. And tell her... He paused, something like pain flickering across his features. Tell her I'm willing to listen if she's willing to talk, really talk, not just make demands and accusations. I nodded, surprised by the concession. And the marriage? His jaw tightened. That's non-negotiable. The alliance must stand. Then we're back where we started, I said with a sigh. She won't agree to that. Perhaps, he acknowledged. But arrangements can have flexibility. Terms can be adjusted, timelines extended. He gave me a measured look. Tell her that much. It's a start. It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the immovable facade, a hint that compromise might be possible after all. Now, Mateo said, his tone shifting to something more immediate. It's late, and you have classes tomorrow. My driver will take you home. The sudden dismissal left me off balance. That's it? For tonight. He reached into his pocket and withdrew his phone, tapping briefly before returning it. I've arranged for a security detail to watch your apartment. Don't be alarmed if you notice them. I don't want your men watching me, I protested. It's not up for negotiation, he said, his voice regaining its authoritative edge. Until this situation with Sophia is resolved, you're under my protection. His expression softened slightly. Consider it a thank you for agreeing to help. I haven't agreed to anything yet, I reminded him. He smiled, that same transformative expression I'd glimpsed before. Haven't you? He gestured toward the door. After you. The ride back to my apartment was silent, my thoughts too chaotic for conversation. The driver, different from the one who had brought us to the penthouse, kept his eyes on the road, professional and discreet. As we pulled up in front of my building, he spoke for the first time. Mr. Ricci instructed me to give you this. He handed back a small envelope, and to tell you he'll be in touch tomorrow. Inside the envelope was a key, new, unscratched, with a small tag attached bearing an address I didn't recognize. No note, no explanation. Just another piece in a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. My apartment felt smaller than ever when I finally entered, the familiar surroundings now seeming fragile, temporary. I checked the locks twice, then laughed at myself. What good would my flimsy door do against the kind of danger Mateo had described, or against Mateo himself, if he decided I was a liability rather than an asset? Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams where Sophia and Mateo spoke in riddles I couldn't understand, while shadowy figures moved just beyond my field of vision. I woke before dawn, gritty-eyed and exhausted, with the distinct feeling that I'd missed something important, some detail that would make sense of everything. The key sat on my nightstand where I'd left it, catching the first gray light of morning. I picked it up, turning it over in my fingers. An address in the warehouse district. An area being rapidly gentrified but still rough around the edges. What was there? A safe house? A meeting place? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The key opens a private entrance. Come at 10 a.m. Alone. M. No explanation, no context. Just the expectation that I would comply. The arrogance was infuriating, yet I found myself checking the time. 8:30, enough time to shower, change, and make my way to the address. This is insane, I told myself as I dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, practical clothes that wouldn't draw attention. I'm getting involved in something dangerous, something far beyond my experience or understanding. The sensible thing would be to ignore the text, stay home, go to class as planned. But I knew I wouldn't. Not just because of Sophia's plea for help, but because of something else. Something I was reluctant to admit even to myself. In Mateo's penthouse, in our conversation, I'd glimpsed a world far removed from my carefully controlled, deliberately small existence. A world of power and danger, yes, but also of consequence, where choices mattered, where actions rippled outward to affect others in tangible ways. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. The warehouse district was quieter than I expected on a weekday morning. Many of the old industrial buildings still awaiting their transformation into luxury lofts or artisan workspaces. The address led me to a nondescript brick building with blacked-out windows and no visible signage. The only indication it wasn't abandoned was the pristine security keypad beside a steel door, clearly new, clearly expensive. The key Mateo had given me opened a smaller door around the corner, leading into a narrow hallway with concrete floors and exposed brick walls. It was cool inside, the air tinged with unfamiliar scents. Leather, oil, something metallic that tickled the back of my throat. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing slightly in the empty space. No response. I followed the hallway to another door, this one ajar, spilling light into the dim corridor. Beyond it, I found a large open space, the high ceilings and industrial beams of the original warehouse preserved, but the space itself transformed. It was a training facility of some kind. Mats covering one section of the floor, punching bags and other equipment arranged around the perimeter, a shooting range visible through glass doors at the far end. But what caught my eye was the center of the room, where Sophia Ricci stood in workout clothes, her hair pulled back, her face flushed with exertion as she threw precise punches at a tall, muscular man holding training pads. Her form was perfect, balanced, controlled, powerful. Not the movements of someone who had taken a few self-defense classes, but of someone who had trained seriously for years. She caught sight of me and froze mid-punch, her expression cycling rapidly through surprise, wariness, and then a kind of resigned understanding. "So, he sent you," she said, lowering her hands. I wondered how he'd play it. The trainer, who I now recognized as Antonio, the bodyguard from the alley, nodded to her and stepped away, giving us privacy while remaining within sight. "Your father didn't send me," I said, approaching cautiously. "He gave me the key, but I came because I wanted to talk to you." Sophia reached for a towel, wiping sweat from her face. Up close, she looked different than she had in the restaurant, stronger, more assured, less the frightened girl, and more a young woman with her own kind of power. "Did he tell you what this place is?" she asked, gesturing around the facility. I shook my head. "My training ground," she said with a bitter smile, "where I learned to protect myself in a world my father insists is too dangerous for me to live freely in." She tossed the towel aside. Ironic, isn't it? He teaches me to fight, but forbids me to use those skills for what matters most. My own freedom. "He's worried about you," I said carefully. "About what might happen if you run." She laughed, a sharp sound without humor. "Of course he is. His perfect alliance would collapse. His control would be challenged. He said people could die," I pressed. "That the Vasquez family would take your disappearance as an insult." Sophia's expression darkened. "Did he tell you what kind of man Carlos Vasquez is? What kind of marriage I'm being sold into?" She moved closer, her voice dropping. "Carlos has had 3 girlfriends disappear in the last 5 years. The last one was found in the river with broken bones that happened before she drowned." My stomach turned. "Your father knows this? Everyone knows." she said bitterly. But in my father's world, business comes before women's safety. Even his daughters. She studied my face. You believed him, didn't you, that this was all about protecting me? I hesitated, remembering Matteo's expression when he spoke of keeping Sophia safe. I think he believes it's true, I said finally. I think he's convinced himself this alliance is the only way to protect you. To prevent a war. There are always alternatives, Sophia said firmly. But my father sees only the solutions that maintain his control. She paced away, then back, energy radiating from her slight frame. Did he offer you something? Money? Protection? He usually does when he wants to use someone. He offered to pay me, I admitted. I refused. She studied me, genuinely surprised. Yet you're here. To understand, I said simply. To help if I can. Both of you. Sophia's laugh was softer this time, almost sympathetic. No one helps Matteo Ricci. They serve him or they oppose him. There is no middle ground. She reached for a water bottle, taking a long drink before continuing. And now he's focused on you. I've seen that look before. You should run while you still can. What look? I asked, unsettled by her warning. Possession, she said bluntly. The same way he looks at anything he decides is his territory, his business, his daughter. She shook her head. Now you're on that list too, I'm sorry. Before I could respond, the door opened again, and Matteo himself entered. He wore a suit today, charcoal gray and impeccably tailored, his expression neutral as he surveyed the scene. I see you've found each other, he said, his voice betraying nothing of his thoughts. You orchestrated it, Sophia replied coldly, as you orchestrate everything. Matteo approached, stopping a few feet away, his eyes moving between us. Ellie and I had an interesting conversation last night, he said. About alternatives. Compromise. Sophia looked at me, surprised and a little betrayed. You went to him? He found me, I clarified. But yes, we talked. He said he's willing to listen to you, really listen, if you're willing to talk to him. I've been trying to talk to him for months, she said bitterly. He doesn't hear anything that contradicts what he's already decided. Perhaps because you speak only in ultimatums and accusations, Matteo countered, his calm facade slipping slightly. Running away, threatening to expose family business, refusing to consider your responsibilities. Responsibilities? Sophia interrupted, her voice rising. Like marrying a man who beats women? Who killed his last girlfriend? Matteo's expression hardened. Those are rumors. Unproven. I saw the police photos, Sophia shot back. Carmela showed them to me. Her cousin was dating Carlos before she accidentally drowned. I watched Matteo's face, saw the minute shift in his expression. Not surprise, I realized with a sinking feeling, but calculation. He'd known, or at least suspected. The alliance is necessary, he said finally, but perhaps the terms can be adjusted. Carlos need not be the Vasquez representative in this union. Sophia stared at him, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. What are you saying? I'm saying there are other Vasquez men. Diego, the younger brother. He has no history of violence, is educated in Europe, has expressed admiration for you in the past. Matteo's voice was measured, reasonable. The alliance would stand, the peace would hold, and you would be safer. It was a concession, a significant one, from what I understood of Matteo's world. But Sophia's expression remained wary. Another arranged marriage to another man I don't love, she said flatly. That's your compromise? It's a start, I interjected, earning surprised looks from both Ricci's. Your father's offering an alternative that addresses your concerns about Carlos, that shows he's listening. Sophia studied me, then her father. And what about my freedom? My right to choose my own life, my own future? Matteo's expression softened unexpectedly. You are my daughter, Sophia, my only child. Everything I have built, everything I have done, has been to secure your future, to protect you from the dangers I cannot shield you from in any other way. By selling me into a political marriage, she challenged, by securing your position in a world that would devour you otherwise, he countered. The Vasquez alliance isn't just about peace, Sophia. It's about ensuring your place in the hierarchy when I'm gone, your safety, your power. I watched them, these two stubborn, proud people locked in a battle where both believed they were right, both fighting for something they considered vital. Father and daughter, mirror images in their determination, their refusal to yield. What if there was a third option? I suggested quietly. They both turned to look at me, and I continued before I lost my nerve. Not running away, not an immediate marriage. What if Sophia agreed to meet Diego, to give him a chance, but with conditions? Time to get to know him, freedom to pursue her own interests in the meantime, and the final decision about marriage remains hers. Mateo's eyes narrowed. The Vasquez family would never agree to such uncertainty. They would if you made it worth their while, I countered. Some other concession, some other guarantee that doesn't involve your daughter's happiness. Sophia looked between us, a flicker of hope warming her expression. You would do that? Give up territory, resources, just to give me a choice? For a moment, Mateo's mask slipped completely, and I saw the father beneath the Mafia boss, the man who had lost his wife too young, who had raised his daughter alone in a dangerous world, whose love and fear had twisted into control. For your safety, your future? Yes, he said softly, but you must meet me halfway, Sophia. No more running, no more threats to expose family matters, and you will give Diego a genuine chance. Sophia hesitated, then nodded slowly. I can agree to that, but I want it in writing, with witnesses outside the family. Mateo's smile was small but genuine. Already so much like me, he extended his hand. We have a deal, daughter. As they shook hands, the tension in the room dissipated like mist in morning sun, not gone completely, but transformed into something more manageable, more hopeful. Sophia shot me a look of guarded gratitude before excusing herself to shower and change. When she was gone, Mateo turned to me. Thank you, he said simply. I didn't do it for you, I replied. No, he agreed. That's precisely why it worked. He studied me with that same intensity I'd come to recognize, but there was something different in it now. Respect, perhaps, and a curiosity that had nothing to do with his daughter. You're a remarkable woman, Ellie Monroe. I shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. What happens now? With us? He raised an eyebrow at the word us, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. That depends entirely on you, he said, echoing his words from the alley that now seemed so long ago. Your part in this particular drama is complete. You're free to return to your life, your studies, your carefully constructed invisibility. The offer should have been a relief. A clean exit from a world I'd stumbled into by chance, a dangerous world that had nothing to do with my quiet ambitions. Yet I found myself hesitating, the thought of returning to my tiny apartment, my solitary existence, suddenly less appealing than it had been just days ago. Mateo watched the conflict play across my face, understanding dawning in his eyes. Or, he said softly, you could stay. Not as Sophia's confidant or my informant, but as yourself. Ellie Monroe, who sees beneath surfaces, who refuses to bend her principles, who changed the course of a family with a simple suggestion of compromise. Staying would be complicated, I said, the understatement making him smile. Life worth living usually is, he countered. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. A gesture so unexpectedly gentle it made my breath catch. Think about it. Take your time. I'm a patient man when something matters. The implication that I mattered, that this tentative connection between us mattered, should have frightened me. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar unfurling in my chest. Possibility. Not romance, not yet, but the potential for something I hadn't allowed myself to want in a very long time. Connection, significance, a life lived in full color rather than the careful grayscale I'd constructed. I'll think about it, I promised, stepping back slightly to clear my head. But I have conditions of my own. He laughed then, a genuine sound that transformed his face. I would expect nothing less from you, Ellie Monroe. Nothing less at all. 3 months later, Sofia Ricci met Diego Vasquez for dinner at Bellissimo. I watched from my new position as assistant manager, No longer a waitress, but not quite an outsider to their world either. They spoke easily together, without the tension that had characterized her interactions with her father. Not love, not yet, but respect. A foundation that might build into something genuine with time. Matteo caught my eye from across the restaurant and raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. Our own relationship was evolving slowly, carefully. Dinners where we talked of books and art rather than family business. Quiet evenings where I studied while he worked. Each of us respecting the other's boundaries. Each of us learning the complex territory of trust. I was still taking nursing classes, still working toward the future I'd planned, but that future now seemed wider, richer with possibility. I was no longer invisible, no longer just surviving. I was becoming visible in ways I'd never expected, to people who saw me clearly, strengths and flaws alike. As I moved through the restaurant, confident in my new role, I thought of that first night when Sophia had slipped a note into my palm. Help me. Such a simple request, yet it had changed everything, had opened doors I never knew existed, had drawn me into a world I never expected to belong in, not as a prisoner or a possession, but as a bridge. A catalyst for change. A woman who had finally stopped being invisible, even to herself.